The president sleeps through his meetings. He wants to build his ballroom and travel with Natalie on their apparently defenseless flying palace gifted by the Emir of Qatar.
Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff name-checked Trump aide Natalie Harp in that campaign speech, which attacked Trump on several fronts. But what you heard there, that brief reference, clearly upset Trump the most. It set off tons of coverage in serious outlets, from the Times to the Journal, big headlines. Now, is this kind of a media frenzy in a summer lull? Or did President Trump break his own PR rules by clearly overreacting to an attack, which lets opponents define the topic for once? Or is there something odd and potentially substantively revealing here? Well, we do know some facts. Harp is a trusted aide with a somewhat vague portfolio. She has the access of top Trump advisors like Stephen Miller, and she is involved with Trump's online posts, really acting more as an amplifier than any kind of filter. And that could be part of her close tie to the president, because he certainly posts a lot online. But, of course, there are other aides who hold titles that are higher than that in that portfolio, like running digital and social media. So the Harp-Trump relationship has gotten more attention lately. You can see them interacting behind the scenes in this film.
How many people are watching?
Can we tell how many, Dan? How many people are watching?
She's talking about how great San Francisco was before she destroyed it. The things of which she complains. Things of which she complains.
That's sort of them kind of doing political work, and she's part of typing up what he wants to tweet or post. Another film from Fox presents one moment when he called her up on stage.
And somebody said she's here. Are you here, Natalie? Where's Natalie? Will you come up here, please?
It is rare to be called up on stage and get that kind of shout out when you are a staff member. Nowadays, we know Harp spends more time with Trump than basically any other aide, and she reports exclusively to the president and no one else. That's an unusual reporting structure, the Journal notes. She sits on key meetings, including in the National Security Situation Room. Now, some White House aides bristle at her access, and you could say that's just the normal kind of political competition. Others are downright mystified by the warmth of the professional relationship they have and how that has spilled into public view. Harp wrote to Trump in a letter, "You're all that matters to me," the Times reports. And Trump tells people about her affection and, quote, love for him. That Harp is the only one who loves him as much as his wife and children, he recounted, according to the Times. His other staff will go off and make money, Trump would say, but, quote, Ms. Harp will never leave him. In another one of those letters, she wrote, "I want things to always be right between us. I also know I've been distracted all week, forgetting to eat throughout the days, even forgetting to sleep, and only catching a couple hours at a time," she explained to her boss, signing it with all my heart, Natalie. If Trump is taking any of the varied criticism he faces very personally these days, it appears to be on this topic.
Mr. President, yesterday Jon Ossoff said you'd rather travel with your aide, Natalie Harp, and build the ballroom than do your job as president. What is your response to Jon Ossoff?
You mean Pee Wee Herman? Pee Wee Herman lookalike?
Trump and his allies have seized on that nickname. That was not off the top of his brain. That's something they've tried to roll out to brand Ossoff with a kind of negative visual comparison to the controversial TV personality. Well, I'll tell you, we will skip any pics of Pee Wee Herman tonight, but here is one of the talking chairs from his show, if you want to think about where the president's mind is. But those attacks have only added fuel to this story and driven headlines, which is a dynamic that Trump knows. The U.S. is facing major problems while Trump's approval has crashed to an all-time low. And every other president usually makes a public point of focusing on domestic problems. The Harp saga does also fit a wider pattern where Trump puts his personal needs, ego, fixations, political revenge, and often questionable and corrupt profiteering above even a pretense of publicly governing this nation facing all these problems. And when you look at the few cabinet meetings Trump has held, which are, of course, a rare vital time to coordinate every federal agency together and set the agenda and do governing, many have devolved into bizarre efforts at praising Trump rather than doing any work.
This is the greatest administration.
I want to thank you for your vision, for your courage.
Thank you for doing the work of the free world.
I don't know of any American president in the modern era that could have made this possible.
I'm grateful this holiday season for you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, it is my distinct honor to be a member of the cabinet.
The greatest cabinet ever for the greatest president ever.
This is stuff for the history books. This is stuff for legacy.
That happens at a bunch of different cabinet meetings, not just one, presumably because people figured out that's what Trump wants and they do that instead of working. That was across more than one. The last actual cabinet meeting was about 3 weeks ago. And Trump, we know, has been focusing on pricey construction, vanity projects, eluding himself. Even as judges have limited his power to unilaterally remodel the White House, which is a permanent public building, not his personal property, or rename the Kennedy Center after himself. New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman has been one of the few reporters on the Trump beat since back in the New York days before he was president. She's interviewed him many times. She has access, and she says quite seriously that she estimates those vanity projects now take up the bulk of his mental focus.
If you looked at like a chart of his mind share, like this I will say about getting into his mind, like 70% of it would be on his renovations.
What? So Washington's interest in this particular saga over this Trump aide does link out to this broader problem in governing, which the public is clearly aware of. This is what Trump's second term looks like. It is totally different from what he promised, and we see the vast power and fortune of public service being turned into the petty private profiteering of a apparently upset lame duck. We witness a leader who is undoubtedly powerful, rich, and famous, but who remains enraged that right now, as he clearly knows, he is so unpopular before a nation of Americans that know him quite well. And so he digs into insisting that he must still be loved. Trump observers noted that his tributes to Ms. Harp don't focus on her for her work or her talents on the job or her as a person. They focus on her view of him, the only one who loves him like a wife, the only one he says will never leave him, as the Times reported in that somewhat odd passage. Those words sound less like an affirmation of a person and more like rank narcissism, where pathological needs for excess admiration are usually linked to low empathy, which could sound familiar. In that old myth, Narcissus was punished in a spell by the goddess of revenge for his, what we now call narcissism. But this ain't mythology. This is real life.
It's a real story because she is this person feeding him undigested garbage that he puts out on social media. She's the person who brought him the picture, allegedly, of the Obamas as apes. She's responsible for a lot of the garbage. And, you know, aides who have more experience, there aren't a lot of them. I mean, he doesn't have the finest cabinet, but, you know, there are other people who you can tell feel that they should be in more that position. And she's crafting Truth Social with him late at night. I mean, it's a real job. She makes $150,000 a year. She's 35. She's not a child. And, you know, all this insinuation, it's really his people who've made it, or who made, you know, Senator Ossoff's funny comments into something kind of dirty or perverse. But that's not what he said, and that's not what I think. I think she's the human binky, the human blanket. I think she's the nurse. She's not the mistress. However she feels, I don't know. It may be just affectionate for an older man. But I think he needs that kind of loyalty, and he also needs that kind of love basically sent back to him. And then, you know, constantly printing out. I mean, it's just so bizarre. Printing out Twitter posts, etc. You know, it's just like she has a lot of control over his mind space, such as it is.
Yeah, I mean, you hear when we talk about IRL in real life.
Yeah, IRL.
This is someone who lives. A lot of his mental focus is online and on the vanity projects, according to the New York Times.
Sure.
While everyone else has to suffer, as I put it, with the IRL punishment, unlike the Greek myth. She spoke at the 2020 Republican convention. Let's take a look.
You see, Mr. President, you've done so much more than your promises made and promises kept. For numbers only tell part of the story. We are the rest of it. Facts with faces of Americans who would still be forgotten if you and our favorite First Lady hadn't given up your own wonderful life so we could have the chance at one.
That's sort of the talking points. There's an almost sort of messianic quality to the way she casts him.
Right.
And again, staying on the substance, that's not how the public feels. This is the highest disapproval he's ever had.
Right, and it keeps climbing.
Based on what people feel is that their lives are harder.
Right.
And that he lied, and that he doesn't even try. I mean, we're in the media. We know how it works. You want to show that you care about high prices. One of the things you do is you hold a high prices related event every Monday.
Right.
In different parts of the country. And it's your way of saying, hey, I'm flying out to here to show you I care, even if you don't move the prices.
Right.
They don't even do that. And I know you wanted to talk about what David Axelrod argued, which is he said, basically, this Ossoff comment could have been done better. The 2 words with Natalie seemed unnecessary. They distracted from the power of the message.
Jon Ossoff drove the news cycle, not only with those 2 words, but they contributed to it. Jon Ossoff is emerging as the single best critic of Donald Trump in every way.